The first words I remember are not a whisper or a confession, but the splitting public crack of my cousin's voice against the smooth tile walls of the hospital corridor. "Gavin, what is this nonsense? Data artist? Just say you're unemployed, man. It sounds better." My mother's face puckered, creased with embarrassment, and Auntie Brenda, clutching her clutch like it was a holy relic, sighed dramatically. Pure theater for the nurses lingering nearby. I stood halfway between ICU and the vending machine, arms loaded with my bag and a tin of Peppadew crackers for my gran. The moment is as permanent in my mind as the moss-green plastic chairs of that hallway. "Why do you always have to embarrass the family?" Brenda's voice pitched up. Johanna, my younger sister, offered a little smile that didn't reach her eyes, as though to say, "I tried to warn you." It was the day after my father's stroke. Our family gathered in that stinking segment of a private hospital, waiting for some word about any improvement. But they were all watching me and my bag and the battered laptop that had barely survived grad school. "What do you actually do, Gav?" my cousin Rhino asked, tilting his head, his jaw working a chunk of biltong. "Do you program? Do you what, paint with numbers?" He laughed, bar one wrapper in hand. "Our Gavin, who makes, what, art? Out of TikTok stats? Maybe the museum will put you next to the giraffe skeleton." I tried to hold my tongue. I stared at him, tried for a laugh of my own, but my voice shuddered. "Maybe one day, Jaw, but not next to the giraffe." Rhino shrugged. "My owl is on site at AngloGold, you know. Real work, not this internet nonsense." I wish I'd said something sharp or wise, but mostly I just wanted to disappear. Mom looked at her shoes. The acid sting of humiliation pooled at the top of my stomach. So I just smiled and walked off. That's what I remember. How it was easier to go to the vending machine downstairs, even when it was the last thing my legs wanted to do. This was Johannesburg, after all. The city never pretends. It spits you out, shows you its bright, lacquered teeth, waits to see if you'll crawl back when it's finished laughing. Those long nights in the hospital, when the beep of heart monitors washed through the walls, and a cheap coffee soured my tongue. I opened my terminal and I coded with headphones in, stubbornly filtering out my family's barbed chatter. I still remember the look a doctor gave me as she passed. Black jeans, faded hoodie, laptop glowing in the pinkish hue of ICU's security lights. "You work for Netflix, brother?" she joked, before moving on. But 3 weeks in that place, my father fading and rallying, 3 solid weeks, I honed my project, the one nobody would hear about. The one I could never quite explain to anyone at that point, not even my girlfriend at the time. It was too easy to call it data art and have people think of Excel sheets and clip art pie charts. My art was motion and sound, the smell of burnt sugar on the Highveld, the muted thunder in our northern storms, measured in bits and heartbeats and glowing lines that danced in phosphorescent color across browser screens. No one believed it was art. They said, "At least you're not stealing," and laughed. The laughter stung, because it meant they had already given up on me in small, subtle ways. My sister tried once, in the back garden, to understand. "Maybe if you called it design," she offered, handing me a beer. It wasn't unkind, but it was tired. What did they want me to do? Return to the safe monotony of accounting, as they all had, or to drift into HR or civil service? I could see their futures, neat and prescribed, tidy homes, worn carpets, plastic leather sofas with doilies. Children whose dreams stopped at El Dorado Park, bursting at the boundary into boredom. Still, I kept working, patient because I had no other option. I waited, plotted and wrangled and scraped datasets no one else wanted, from the scattered memories of power outages flickering in census data. to voice recordings of city buses screeching across the Nelson Mandela Bridge. Every time I opened my project, at a family braai or a Sunday lunch, they'd laugh and switch topics to rugby scores or house prices. I learned patience and something quieter, the taste of anger, its afterburn in the ribs. When my father died, I felt nothing at first, a hollow the size of a skipped meal. I returned from the funeral, nursed the hollow inside me, and told nobody about my growing archive or the piece I was building for a competition that none of them had heard of. I stopped answering questions about my income. I got a job at a small data consultancy firm in Braamfontein. There was no glamour, no flair, just a window that overlooked a rectangle of sky, greasy polony rolls for lunch, and people who made jokes in ETL and Python. But at night, I fell into my work, into the vision that nobody cared about but me. Humiliation morphed to patience and then dulled itself into a kind of numb endurance. Years trickled by. I cut out the family WhatsApp group, moved into a flat above a Shisanyama in Melville, watched seasons pass with no word from Rhino or Brenda or the others, except birthday SMSs that felt like obligations. My heart beat, but its rhythm was dulled by Johannesburg's familiar ache. The break, if you could call it that, came out of nowhere. A late-night email, subject line Josie sends Global Circuitry Summit invite. They'd seen my piece online, a stitched-together panoramic motion Johannesburg at night, colored by 6 decades of census flows, glowing threads moving through the city like veins in an exposed arm. It had won a minor European competition. They wanted me to show in Paris. I could barely believe it. I scrolled through the email in my shoebox apartment, hands shaking, stomach dancing with a lurch between terror and hope. I told nobody. I packed my laptop and passport. Took 3 days annual leave. Landed in Paris with Johannesburg's dust still inside my sneakers. The gallery was a white haze, all steel and glass. Nothing like the knotted desperation of home. I watched strangers stand before my work, their faces open. One woman cried quietly, her shoulders trembling. A French developer tried, awkwardly, to explain why he found it beautiful. I believed him because he didn't know how to exaggerate. People wanted to talk, to commission, to post about this work. They called it revelatory, even masterful. I found words again. After that came the commissions. An urban movement exhibit in Madrid. A commercial adapted for projection in London. Suddenly, emails trickled in from Johannesburg newsrooms, minor, then major. Enquiries about lectures, podcasts, invites to schools. I landed a major residency with Rand Merchant Bank, tasked with animating the invisible pulse of the city. That first big check felt like forgiveness for every slow dawn in my old Melville flat, for every time I hid my screen so the world wouldn't tell me again that my vision was pointless. It bought my freedom and my first new pair of shoes in years. Still, I kept my story close. My success was documented in press clippings, online introductions, checks paid into accounts that didn't care whether I scraped by on 2-minute noodles or catered lunches. But the clippings never made it into our family WhatsApp group. I still didn't go to the braais. It was Brenda who eventually phoned. Her voice was edged with brittle desperation. Gavin, Chani, I have a favor. The school fundraiser, you know, your old primary, they're doing a heritage festival. And, well, Rhino insists you're too busy, but the principal wants an inspirational story, someone from Aldo Park who did good. Will you come? I laughed. Couldn't help myself. I thought I painted with numbers, I teased. She hesitated. They've seen your name in the newspaper and the TV. For a brief moment, I considered refusing. The old humiliation returned, the knots in my stomach. But there was something else, too. the hard-earned satisfaction that comes only when you've peered into the cavern of everyone's doubt and found the light. Sure, Auntie, tell them I'll come. I spent days preparing, not just slides or demo videos. I wanted to do something no Johannesburg stage had seen, a real-time projection, an artful spilling out of movement, voices, and city history, all live, mapped in glowing colors across the cracked assembly hall wall of my childhood. The final piece would pulse and drift and shift, showing the city alive, flowing from the days of trolleybuses to ride shares, from forced removals to street parades. The evening of the event was brisk for a high-veld autumn. The sky was dirty rose. I drove out to Eldo Park, passing neat rows of hullabaloo houses and battered block towers. I parked across from the reunion tent, heart thumping, hands slick with nervous sweat. My mother met me at the door. "You look well," she said, eyes bright with something uneasy, pride or uncertainty. She hadn't seen my new haircut, my tailored jacket, the laptop under my arm. They'd crammed folding tables along the narrow path to the hall. Volunteers sold vet coke at a discount. I caught glimpses of faces I recognized, old teachers, neighbors, the few classmates I'd avoided at recess. Then I saw Rhino, beer belly straining against a faded rugby jersey. His eyes slid over me, not quite contemptuous, but not embracing either. I took my place behind the makeshift AV table. The principal, a rotund man with a prominent gap between his teeth, hushed the crowd. "We are so grateful, so proud he went to this very school, our own Gavin Alcott." Polite clapping, maybe 100 faces. Brenda was at the front, lips pursed, eyebrows raised. Rhino slouched beside her, arms crossed, eyes half closed. I tried to look calm. My hands shook as I loaded the executable. The laptop whirred, the projector flickered. The assembly hall wall morphed into an inky black surface. I began quietly. So much of our city is invisible until you choose to see it. I ran my fingers over the trackpad. Even if you live inside the heart of it, it's easy to believe your life is ordinary, that your home is small, your story easily dismissed. Lines of orange began crawling over carvings in the wall, forming skeleton roads and moving patterns. The room leaned forward, watching. When I was in school here, I spent hours watching old buses roll by on Malibongwe. I collected their numbers, later their schedules, then the stories of people who rode them. The shapes danced, old census flows, population shifts, voices echoing, digitized from scratchy cassettes. The crowd was silent. Brenda mouthed something I couldn't catch. Rhino's jaw slackened, arms dropping away from his chest. I showed scenes, Johannesburg's rise and fall and rise again. The chaos of the minibus ranks, the city's heartbeat glitched by load shedding, the music of languages merging and overlaying, harmonizing into a pulse that made the hall feel less like a battered relic, more like something throbbing and bright. I ended quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. We are all threads in this city. What we dismiss or mock is often what we need to see most. The piece finished on a single glowing line. The room was silent at first, save for